In rural America, violent crime reached its highest level in a decade. The loss of jobs and the opioid epidemic are two of the biggest reasons. When you think about crime, what do you picture? Probably the dark, scary streets of a crowded city. After all, cop shows always seem to be set in a big city. But while violent crime is still a problem in urban areas, many of them are in fact safer now than they've been in decades. The violent crime rate in rural areas, meanwhile, has climbed above the national average for the first time in 10 years. In Iowa, the overall violent crime rate rose by 3% between 2006 and 2016, but shot up by 50% in communities with fewer than 10,000 residents. Violent crime rates have doubled in rural counties in West Virginia over the past couple of decades, while tripling in New Hampshire. Rural areas which traditionally have had lower crime rates have seen dramatic increases in incarceration rates, says Jacob Kang-Brown, a research associate in the Vera Institute of Justice. We see them now having the highest incarceration rates in the country. Explanations for this change are familiar ones. Not all rural areas are poor, but many have lost jobs. As factories have closed and farming has become increasingly consolidated, lack of employment naturally led to increases in poverty, which is closely associated with crime. See that, folks, for those who don't believe that poverty is associated with crime. The opioid epidemic has hit rural America particularly hard, and methamphetamine remains a major problem in many small towns. While there's more rural crime than in the past, there's also a shortage of law enforcement. Dwindling tax bases means fewer sheriff deputies doing the work. As a result, deputies have had to patrol many times the geographic area that a city cop covers on his beat. Last year, voters in Josephine County, Oregon, approved a public safety levy after 5 previous attempts had failed in as many years. Prior to its passage, there were times when large parts of the county, which has been hit hard by a decline in the timber industry, received no service from the sheriff's office. Residents would have to wait 2 or 3 hours for a response from the state police. Lack of enforcement naturally breeds crime. Criminals, particularly those dealing in drugs, become emboldened or move operations to an area where there's little danger of detection. Even when perpetrators are caught, there's not always a place to put them. Before the Josephine County levy passed, the sheriff's office could afford to fill only half the beds at its jails. Whether it's law enforcement or crime analytics or investigation capacity or behavioral capacity, on all those fronts, rural areas have less resources available than urban areas, says Marshall Clement of the Council of State Governments Justice Center. It's good that the problems of rural America have been getting more attention over the past couple of years because they're at risk of starting to compound and create new ones. Here is another one for you. Economy, not marrying, deaths of despair. The white population in South Carolina is changing. York County. State vital records show that South Carolina isn't there just yet, but the state is inching closer to the national trend of more white people dying than are being born. Birth and death rates are key indicators in how a population is changing. The national rates show America is becoming more racially diverse. Department of Health and Environment Control data shows South Carolina had almost 2,800 more births than deaths amongst white populations in 2016. York and Lancaster had more births than deaths. Chester County had more deaths than births. Those statistics have come even as one national study claimed South Carolina's white population in natural decrease, a term the study uses to describe a point where there are more deaths than births in a population. A recent study lists South Carolina among a growing number of states where white deaths outpace births. Discrepancies aren't unusual and can be based on labeling. The Applied Population Lab study done at the University of Wisconsin-Madison deals specifically with non-Hispanic whites. The state data lists births by mother's race alone and only as white. We used data for non-Hispanic whites, said Kenneth M. Johnson, who co-authored the national study with Rogelio Saenz. The difference between white and non-Hispanic whites is an important distinction. Also, individual states may use slightly different methods to classify births and deaths. Federal data recognizes by race white, black, or African American, or Native Asian, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, and by ethnicity, Hispanic, Latino, or non-Hispanic. So, for example, a Rock Hill woman who might check white on hospital forms after giving birth would account for a birth in the white category at the state level. However, she may be listed differently in the federal study if she also selected Hispanic or Latino on a federal form. According to U.S. Census data, 4.7% of South Carolina population, more than 236,000 people, are listed as both white and Hispanic. Birth and death totals at the state and county level are different too, based on where the birth or death happened. For example, take a K mother who gives birth at a Charlotte hospital will count in one data set but not in the other. On a typical day in South Carolina in 2016, there were 157 births and 132 deaths. The white population in South Carolina and nationally still makes up a majority. The U.S. Census Bureau estimates there is little more than 5 million people living in South Carolina. The white population accounts for 68.5% of them, with 27.3% black and 5.7% Latino or Hispanic. York County has little more than 266,000 people. The Census Bureau estimates that more than 75% of York County is white compared to 19% black, 6% all other races. The county is almost 6% Hispanic or Latino. Lancaster County is 75% white and 22% black among its nearly 93,000 residents. More than 5% of those residents are Hispanic. Chester County is 60% white compared to 37%, with 2% listed as Hispanic or Latino. Chester County is about a third the size of Lancaster County. The Wisconsin study used data for the National Center for Health Statistics, not the state health department, bringing in discrepancies with federal and state listings for race and ethnicity. The question of whether more white people are dying than being born in South Carolina isn't an easy one. However, even with state data, there is a trend toward white births and deaths converging. In 1997, the birth rate amongst whites was 12.8% per 1,000 residents. 12.8 per 1,000 residents. The death rate was 9 per 1,000 residents. By 2007, the birth rate was up to 13.3, while the death rate sat at 9.3. Then the recession hit. The birth rate has declined and remained the same every year since 2008. The death rate has increased. In 2016, there was less than one birth per 1,000 residents than death, 11.1 births to 10.3 deaths among whites. The recession is the main reason the national study cites for births decreasing amongst whites. The U.S. Census Bureau studies also relate economics with fertility rates, with a down economy or an economic uncertainty typically tied to lower birth rates. The pace of decline in white births intensified from 2007 to 2016, due in part to the Great Recession's significant impact on U.S. fertility, reads the Applied Population Study. The recession, the greatest shock to the American economic system in nearly 2 generations, influenced both fertility and life cycle decisions for many families. The impact isn't specific to whites. Some 500,000 fewer babies are being born annually now than had pre-recession fertility rates been sustained. Study authors wrote, and nearly 2.1 million more women are prime childbearing age or childless than would be expected. A significant share of those 500,000 annual births that are not occurring would have been white. Nationally, more white people died than were born in a year for the first time in 2016. Whites made up almost 78% of the U.S. deaths, but just 50% 3% of all births. The national study indicates that the trend is spreading to more states. In 2000, only 4 states had more deaths than births among non-Hispanic white population. In 2015, the first year South Carolina made the list, there were 23 states. 3 more states joined the group in 2016. It's more likely states will join the list in coming years than fail to make them again. Once an area begins to experience natural decrease, the trend is likely to continue, reads the study. The white natural decrease, as the study terms it, has been happening for more than a decade in Florida, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, West Virginia, California, New Mexico, and Connecticut. More recent states to join South Carolina include North Carolina, Tennessee, Ohio, Michigan, and others. States like Texas, Illinois, Wisconsin, Georgia are seeing slightly more white people born than dying. Alaska, Virginia, and 9 largely Midwestern states have larger gaps where births still exceed deaths. The national decrease is largely a phenomenon of the white population. Only 3 states, West Virginia, Vermont, and Maine, had more deaths than births among their entire population. Latino births outpaced deaths by a substantial margin in every state, according to the study. The path toward more white deaths than births has been a long but at least of late steady one. In 2000, there were 403,000 more white people born than died in the United States. In 2010, there were 192,490 more births than deaths. A tipping point came in 2015 where only 6,648 more people, about the population of Clover, were born than died. Wow, that's a big drop. Data from 2016 shows 39,409 more white people more died than were born nationally. Jesus. The convergence comes from both ends. Deaths are up almost 10% from 2009 to 2016. Births dropped more than 11% from 2000 to 2016. Economics and people waiting longer to get married, if they marry at all, are listed among impacts on the birth end. There are also reasons why more white people are dying younger, up in the death rate. Combined with an aging white population, these factors put the birth to death rates for whites, 0.98, well below those of Latinos, 4.9, Asians, 3.9, and African Americans, 1.7 in 2016. Deaths of despair, as the study calls them, are up amongst whites aged 30 to 59. Such deaths include drug-induced deaths, intentional suicide, accidental drug overdose, and alcohol deaths, read the study. Such deaths have increased sharply in recent years amongst whites. Those deaths of despair alone were the difference. 8 states had more deaths than births among whites in 2016. These deaths of despair are likely to accelerate the transition from natural increase to natural decrease in many other states in the near future. And that is from the Fort Mill Times. The demographic transition is rolling right along. You wonder why they're trying to steal children. There's another video that I have to do about Trump and the Latino children that they have basically absconded with and separated from their families. Going to make that permanent, probably, but I'll do that one later. Demographics. Learn it. You can't understand these problems without having the tools, people. You guys stop being sheep, stop being lazy, stop worrying about just eating grass and actually start being shepherds and figure out what's going on. Middle America is being hollowed out as we speak. A lot of your surviving smarter people are leaving these towns that are dying slowly but surely. We're probably seeing a great white migration from the rural areas to the urban areas. But this is not just something that's happening in the United States. It's happening all over the white world. This is the demographic decline that they talked about. They've been talking about the demographic decline since the 1980s. But now it's apparent and we can actually see it where it's probably reached its crossover point. And so once you reach the crossover point, it's probably too late. It's probably too late to reverse this trend. But we don't know because it's never been done before. This is only a guess. So are white people in trouble? I would say yes. Is this the reason white people are lashing out? I would say yes. What you guys need to do is stay the fuck out of their way. We need to build our own enclaves, our own towns, and stay the fuck out of their neighborhoods. Because with them come police and guns and other stuff that we don't need to deal with. Capiche? Let them have their karma. Don't wish no bad luck, but let them get what they deserve. Because it's done by their own hand and not ours. Anyway, with that, I'm going to jump off of here. This is BGS out, and I will see you guys on the next one.